Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Palestine, Voice of the Palestinian People. It's April 3rd, 2014, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Qawas. This week we are interviewing Tyler Levitan, campaign coordinator for Independent Jewish Voices in Canada. We will talk with him about IJV's Expose the JNF Campaign, their new postcards, and their support for the BDS movement. We will also discuss the upcoming Jewish National Fund Galas and dinners happening across the country, starting with Vancouver on April 6th. And we'll talk with him also about the campaigns to protest these galas and dinners. Good afternoon to you, Tyler, and welcome again to the Voice of Palestine.
Good afternoon to you too, and thanks for having me.
You know, to start with, the JNF, Jewish National Fund Canada, had a tax-deductible status for a long time, I'd say 30, 40 years, I'm not sure of the exact term, which is really a disgrace, because basically giving tax-deductible status for an organization that supports racism against even the law in Canada, supposedly, But could you give us a background about the JNF first, and why IJV thinks it's important to have a campaign called Expose the JNF?
Sure. So the JNF, as you mentioned, does have charitable status in Canada. Actually, the JNF Canada is just a branch of the JNF in Israel, and it's known there by the Hebrew name Keren Kayemet L'Israel. So that's the main organization, and it's a quasi-governmental organization because it does have some responsibilities in terms of the administration of land, of public lands in Israel, at least lands that Israel claims are nationalized, which are in fact nationalized for the Jewish people, so not for all Israeli citizens. Mm-hmm. So the JNF, or Keren Kayemet L'Israel, in Israel, they actually hold 6 of 13 seats on the Israel Lands Council, which makes decisions on behalf of the Israel Lands Administration. And the Israel Lands Administration has administrative authority over, 80% of all the land in Israel. Yeah. I should say 93%, because it includes as well the land that the JNF owns in Israel, which amounts to about 13% of all land in the state. Mm-hmm. And what's disturbing about this is that the JNF, it works to the exclusive benefit of the Jewish people, and not just the Jewish Israeli citizens, but Jewish people all over the world, who the JNF claims are the beneficiaries of the JNF. And their goal has always been, they were founded in 1901 as an organization, so they very long predate the existence of the so-called Jewish state of Israel. But their goal has always been to acquire land in historic Palestine for use by Jews and to be held in perpetuity for the Jewish people. Basically, the 13% that they own are exclusively held for the use of Jews, meaning that it's against their own bylaws to lease and to sell this land to non-Jews. Mm-hmm. But as many of your listeners likely already know, 20% of Israel's population, within their pre-1967 borders, are Palestinian, the native inhabitants who don't have equal rights within that state. And because the JNF has so much influence over the Israel Lands Authority, which controls 93% of all land in the state, it means that there's systematic discrimination in the allocation of land obviously that privileges Jews because the land is nationalized for the Jewish people. So the JNF is really part of the system of Israeli discrimination, of a system of apartheid, of essentially controlling the resources within the state for the benefit of one people and at the cost, to the detriment of the indigenous people, which are the Palestinians. So JNF Canada is just kind of an organization here that raises funds here, tax deductively, and sends it to Karen Kamet L'Israel, the JNF in Israel, for them to implement different kind of projects that they engage in that are based on this idea of acquiring as much land as they can for the benefit and for the for the use of the Jewish people in perpetuity.
Yeah, I guess this is also based on the Zionist ideology that the land should belong to the Jewish people and exclusively to the Jewish people. And they've been trying hard to do that since its inception. But you mentioned that the JNF, which was established in 1901, which is over a century ago, more than a century ago, basically controls also the Israel Land Authority. You know, I mean, if they have 6, all they have to have is one extra person, and we sure that the other 7 on the authority, like you mentioned, will be mostly Zionist, if not all Zionists, so they'll support them in whatever decision they make. Don't you think so?
Oh yeah, there's without a doubt they're all Zionist, and they all agree that with the premise of the JNF, which is essentially that Israel and including Greater Israel, so all of historic Palestine, is essentially a land without a people for a people without a land. That's the slogan that the JNF has always operated under, that they ignore the existence of Palestinians and they assume that the land just needs to be redeemed, which is one of the words that they commonly use, or reclaimed. That it's kind of been laying dormant, and the Jewish people were expelled, 2,000 years ago, and they've been wandering, and they've returned to their home. And it's kind of just been laying to waste in that 2,000-year period, and completely ignoring in a way that is, you could make the parallel with genocide in terms of the way that thinking is this people doesn't exist, and that's how we're going to operate, and that is how they've operated. They have never acknowledged Palestinians, and basically their maps from the time of 1901 to the present still show. If you look on their donation boxes, it still shows historic Palestine without any mention of Palestine. It's just the land of Israel to them. And also forgetting that some of the oldest cities in the world are in Palestine, like, for example, Jericho. It's one of the oldest towns in the whole world, really. To say land without people, is ridiculous, because, cities and towns all across Palestine, from Jaffa to Jericho to Jerusalem to Bethlehem to Nazareth, goes way back in history. So unless these cities were depopulated for a long time after they were established, Yeah, no, there's no basis in reality to the way that the JNF markets themselves and how they view the world. It's a very dangerous way of viewing what's going on in Palestine and the history of things, because it just denies the Nakba, denies the Palestinian historical presence, and what they're continuing to do there is they're continuing to acquire this land at the expense of the indigenous Palestinians. So, they had the original mandate of helping to establish a Jewish state, and I think I'd imagine that you know, a lot of Zionists around the time that Israel did declare its independence probably figured that the JNF's mandate would have expired at that point because they were successful. They did found a state.
Yeah.
But instead of just dissolving this organization, what the State of Israel did was they found that it actually was quite beneficial to their project of appropriating the land of refugees and covering up that land to erase the historical presence of Palestinians. So, you know, as you know, that there's over 400 villages that were ethnically cleansed, and what happened is a lot of them were demolished by the State of Israel, and then were through the custodian was then sold to the JNF for very cheap. And the JNF was then able to plant trees on this land and cover up the existence of the Palestinian villages and to prevent Palestinian refugees from ever returning to them. So the JNF has been kind of used as kind of an offloading agent by the State of Israel for some of their dirty work, and that way they can get away with saying we're not discriminating. It's this, you know, this private organization that's discriminating, when in fact they're really a quasi-governmental organization because they are giving state functions, and you know, they're just continuing kind of that same project of dispossessing Palestinians to this day.
Yeah, actually some of their representatives are from the IDF, like we had one here in Vancouver a couple of years ago who was IDF members, and he was the head of the JNF here in Vancouver. So obviously the link is there between the JNF and the State of Israel, whether it's the military or the government. You know, it's worth noting also that in 1947, when the partition plan happened, only 6% of the land was under, you know, Jewish controlled, and that includes the JNF and includes the indigenous Jewish people in Palestine. Let's not forget that they had some property there before the Zionist invasion of Palestine. So, but you know, and since then, now they control most of the land. You know, I don't know if you've seen the EU report. They're saying the Palestinians inside Israel only allowed for, which is 20%, like you mentioned, of the population, only allowed to, you know, have access to only 3% of the total area of Israel. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really clear that there is no equality or, you know, discrimination is blatant there. So, you know, let's talk a bit about the campaign, IGV campaign, and what you're trying to achieve with it.
Sure. So the campaign is called the Expose the JNF Campaign. So we're actually a signatory to the call for action from the international Stop the JNF campaign, which is part of the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement. And we've chosen to implement that campaign in our own way through our organization to expose the JNF in Canada to lots of organizations here and to parts, I guess, segments of the Jewish community who are willing to listen to us. And ultimately the goal of it is to raise awareness about what the JNF does in Israel and how their charitable status is quite scandalous here, and that ultimately the Canada Revenue Agency should, you know, actually do its job and investigate this organization and hopefully actually revoke its charitable status. So our means of doing that is through continuing to publicly protest their fundraising galas, the negative galas like the one in Vancouver, which I know Independent Jewish Voices is participating in with the Canada-Palestine Association and other groups. And we are organizing those kind of protests throughout the country where different IJV chapters are active and helping to play a part in those with other Palestine solidarity organizations. We're also distributing postcards that are addressed to the Minister of National Revenue. Her name is Carrie Lynn Finley. So she's you know, a minister in Harper's cabinet who actually would have the responsibility to initiate the revocation of the JNF charitable status. Obviously, it's very unlikely that anyone under under Harper's authority, would take any action on the JNF, knowing how close of a friend Harper is to the state of Israel and to the JNF more specifically. But the idea is to build a grassroots campaign across Canada of people who are educated about why this organization ought to not have charitable status, and to continue to just mount pressure on the Canada Revenue Agency, because certainly the bureaucrats who are at the Canada Revenue Agency are getting the message. And when there is ultimately a change in the regime in Canada, the governing party, mind you, all parties are quite favorable to the JNF, but there may be a better opportunity to be able to put pressure on the Canada Revenue Agency if perhaps they aren't being as closely monitored and controlled by the Harper government. Because certainly it would be the job, the legal duty of the Canada Revenue Agency to implement its mandate, which is to ensure that organizations receiving charitable status are actually charitable in the work that they do. And I don't think you can make the argument that the JNF is really a charitable organization, considering their complicity in countless war crimes. And really the work that they do violates Canadian law, specifically Supreme Court of Canada decision in 1951 restricting ownership of ruled that restricting ownership of land to a certain ethnic group is illegal. So Israel's own Attorney General said that the JNF's behavior, their policies, and their actions are systematically discriminatory to Palestinian citizens of Israel. And they haven't adequately dealt with that to address that. And the JNF still has enormous power and influence within the state to continue to discriminate against Palestinian citizens, which it's continuing to do. So we're hoping that the postcard will help with that. And as well, we're reaching out to organizations and businesses who support the JNF fundraising galas, who donate to them, and as well as the individuals who are receiving honors from them, and who are even performing for them. So right now, Independent Jewish Voices has a campaign to put pressure on this upcoming talent in Canada, a Canadian musician by the name of Nikki Yanofsky, who's only 19 years old, and she comes from a very proud Jewish family that I believe is quite supportive of the JNF. So I'd imagine she's in a bit of a difficult situation right now, where she's been presented with the facts. We have reached out to her and her agent or her manager, and made it very clear to them that their support for the JNF is supporting racial discrimination, and that she ought to be supporting equal rights. So we have a petition on change.org that's only been up here for a few days, but we've already gotten over 400 signatures. So we're trying to build momentum with that campaign to hopefully pressure her to back down. And we think that this is the kind of work we ought to be doing in Canada around this, to expose this organization and try and get public attention, because ultimately their position is indefensible. So long as the media is cooperative, which to this point they haven't been, but I think with enough public knowledge on this issue, enough people, I believe, would be outraged enough to contact media and to take more public vocal opposition to the JNF. So that's really our overarching goal of this campaign, to expose it to the point where we've built and we've contributed to building a grassroots movement that is aimed at having the JNF's charitable status revoked in Canada.
Yeah, and also you have a petition on your website against the JNF. Could you tell us a bit about it and why you chose to do it through your website and not through other petition online groups?
So we have a petition on our website. I think the reason we chose to put it on our website was just to draw more traffic to our website. But yeah, it's basically also because we want it to be kind of a permanent thing. It's an email petition, so every time somebody signs it, it automatically sends an email message to the people that are being petitioned. So in this particular petition that we have, we are petitioning the Minister of National Revenue, Carrie Lynn Finley, who we're also sending the JNF postcard to that I mentioned, as well as the party leaders, Justin Trudeau, Thomas Mulcair, and Elizabeth May. So every time somebody signs it, those leaders are getting notified of the JNF's racial discrimination and Canadian complicity in that whole system.
Yeah. Do you have a list of who signed it too? Because I tried to see how many people signed it, because it's really empowering for people to know how many people signed the petition. But I couldn't get a figure there.
Yeah, it's not, I guess, through the way our website operates, it's not made public, but I can look into it. If I enter the website, I'll be able to find that number for you, and I could send that to you.
Or, it's not really important to me. It's important that everybody sees how many people signed it, and that will encourage other people to sign it, I believe. So that's why, it's kind of empowering effect for people to sign it, because, some people, they see so many people signed it, and then they feel encouraged to sign it. But, that again, it's up to you really. But I thought I'd mention that because I was curious, and I'm sure other people mentioned it, that, it'd be good to know how many people signed the petition. But there are other petitions online against the JNF, is there?
Yeah, I know that there's definitely petitions that you find around on change.org, potentially other websites. Yeah. We actually have another petition. We have several things going on at once with this campaign, but we have a hard copy petition that I'm going to get tabled in Parliament probably sometime in the next few months.
Good. Yeah.
So, you only need 25 signatures for it to be tabled, but we have at least a few hundred at this point. So, these are just all opportunities to raise awareness of the issue. We know that it's definitely a long-term goal to be able to have this discussed very openly and honestly in the public. But the only way that will ever happen, I believe, is if we are all doing our part to educate individuals about this. So that's kind of the motivation, the overarching motivation behind the campaign, is to raise awareness.
I'm sure, it's basically raising awareness, because I'm not sure if you're aware, Dr. Ismail Zaid from Halifax, who been campaigning to take the status of the JNF charitable status for the last 40 years, and he's a survival of the Canada Park that's built on his village, Yalu and Beit Nuba and Amwas. He's, I believe, from Beit Nuba, and he didn't have much success with the government, but except to publicize the thing where many people are aware of it now, including he basically encouraged Ron Sabah to take the case, because he listened to him at one of his lectures, and Ron is digging deeper into it, and I'm sure you're aware of his work exposing the JNF complicity and the complicity of bureaucrats inside the Revenue Canada to cover up what the JNF stands for. So, like you said, we're not going to expect Mr. Harper, who addressed the JNF last December, and they gave him a sanctuary in his name in the Hula, and we're not going to expect others like Baird and Kenny to really push for revoking the status, because if anything, they are complicit in Israeli ethnic cleansing and war crimes.
I agree.
Rather than helping the Palestinian people gain their rights. So it's the JNF. I was looking at their schedule for this year, and it starts in Vancouver on the April 6th, and then Halifax, May 22nd, Winnipeg, May 27th, London, June 1st, Hamilton, June 8th, Montreal, June 11th, Windsor, June 17th, Calgary, June 18th, Edmonton, June 19th, Ottawa, October 21st. Toronto, they haven't set a date yet, but I'm sure they're going to do it. Usually it's later, like last year was in December 1st. But I'm trying to mention those to make people aware who are listening that really there should be a tradition of confronting them and picketing them and exposing their racist practices against the Palestinian people, especially what they're doing now as the card showed what they're doing in Al-Aqarib in the Negev, basically ethnically cleansing the rest of the Palestinians from the Negev. So it'll be good that people be aware of where they're doing it. I want to ask you, I don't know if you're aware of it, but they said that they're celebrating their 65th dinner or gala last year. Is that, I mean, we know that it wasn't, this is not the establishment, the date of the JNF, because as we said, it was established in 1901. But is this their galas in Canada, or you're not sure of what they're talking about? I'm not really.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to see where it was written and whatnot, but yeah, my guess is that, it's been going on in Canada for at least that time, but it could mean elsewhere as well.
Yeah, because it's been since basically the establishment of the State of Israel, this thing is going on, and we know if they had that tax-deductible status, they had it since way back then, it seems. But, it's important that people be aware where their tax dollar is going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, if you could tell us a bit about the work in general, because I know IJV also involved with other boycott activities, BDS activities, like the Soda Stream and other things. Could you tell us a bit about these activities that IJV is involved in?
Sure, yeah. So the Expose the JNF campaign is, I would say, one of three major campaigns that IJV is involved with across the country. The other is the boycott of Soda Stream, which we participate in with several other groups as part of the Canadian Boycott Coalition for Justice in Palestine, Israel. So there's several groups, 10 groups altogether at the moment that are involved with organizing around that, including your group, HANA, Canada-Palestine Association, and the United Church group that's mostly involved with doing activist work around the Unsettling Goods campaign, which is the boycott campaign that the United Church voted on back in the summer of 2012. They're quite involved in the boycott coalition as well. Right now, what we're launching in the next day or two is a national campaign to focus on Canadian Tire stores, to put pressure on Canadian Tire to remove Soda Stream from its shelves. I guess for those of your listeners who aren't aware, Soda Stream is a do-it-yourself carbonated beverage machine that is made in the illegal Israeli settlement of Ma'ale Adumim, or the Mishor Adumim, the industrial park of this settlement. And the settlement bisects the West Bank into two. It's a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. It's considered to be illegal by all standards of international law. And, it's only leading to further the violation of Palestinian human rights and self-determination. Mm-hmm. So it's important that all individuals around the world who support human rights take up in these boycott activities of speaking. What we're encouraging people to do is to speak to Canadian Tire store managers, and we're hoping that these store managers will then pass on the message to the national office in Toronto. And with enough people across the country, and we're certain that we can really make it a cross-country effort because Canadian Tires are found literally in every town and city across Canada, that anyone could simply go and have these very basic facts that they can relay to the store managers, who can then, be building pressure on the national office. The other thing we're going to do is have a change.org petition that goes directly to the national office, so individuals can also directly put pressure on the national office, who are really in charge of the national supply chain and determining what products are on it. And actually their national suppliers' code of conduct is being violated by selling SodaStream because of the fact that it's complicit in an illegal activity, and it's really represents something that goes against international law. So that's the big campaign that we're involved with around that. And then the other campaign is around generally defending free speech. We call it the Defend Free Speech campaign, because we acknowledge that as Jewish people, Israel claims to speak on our behalf, and we are so-called beneficiaries of the Jewish National Fund. We are implicated to a large degree in what's happening in Israel-Palestine by the very nature of our existence as Jews. So we are given a privileged voice. It's unfortunate that racist kind of discourse exists, where the Jewish voice is considered to be more credible than a Palestinian, Muslim, or an Arab voice. But usually the smear of anti-Semitism is used by the powerful Israel lobby groups in Canada and elsewhere to silence criticism of Israel. So it's important, we feel, that as Jews who are very much in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for self-determination, that we as Jews say that we do not believe that it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. We do not believe it's anti-Semitic to have anti-Zionist views, and that Zionism and Judaism are not the same thing. They never have been, and they never will be. So we publicly voice our support in solidarity with Palestinian boycott efforts and other efforts of Palestine solidarity groups in Canada, to say that we stand in support of these efforts. So one of the things we've done in the past around this campaign was to challenge the Canadian Parliamentary Coalition to Combat Anti-Semitism, which some of your viewers may be familiar with. It's a bit old now. It's from 2009. It was basically an attempt by the Conservatives and some other pro-Israel MPs to try and introduce legislation into Canada that would make it a hate crime to criticize Israel, to advocate for boycotts of Israel, to participate in Israeli Apartheid Week, and it would essentially be equating Jews in Canada with Israel, and this is very dangerous, and ultimately this failed. But I think independent Jewish voices played, I think, a very important role in exposing that and saying that as Jews, this idea that anti-Semitism is on the rise in Canada is completely false, and it is only based on the idea that criticizing Israel indicates a hatred of Jews, which is couldn't be further from the truth, and is a very dangerous manipulation of the term and exploitation, really, of the term anti-Semitism, which conveys a history of real horrific tragedy and discrimination towards Jews, including my ancestors. So it's a huge insult to Jews and to Palestinians, really. And so we're
humanity, actually, because to humanity also, because implicating all Jews with the crimes of what Israel is doing is the optimum in anti-Semitism, really. It's really putting on the shoulder of the Jews all the ills that the Israeli establishment and the Zionist movement is committing on a daily basis against the Palestinians. So I agree with you. It is also, I find it that, this blind support to Israel in the name of the Holocaust and in the name of the Jews is really the main promoter of anti-Semitism in the recent history. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I think that anti-Semitism disappeared to a large degree in the Western world following the Second World War, where actually there was lots of different struggles that were won around liberation, different kinds of, I guess, anti-colonial struggles, where it became not at all socially acceptable to discriminate against somebody based on their ethnic or religious background in the Western world. And certainly it became very, very frowned upon to discriminate against Jews following the Second World War. Certainly there was still discrimination that persisted, and in a lot of places there was still discrimination that persisted after the Second World War. And I think after the 60s probably marked a key turning point in the struggles won for civil rights in the United States and elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think that anti-Semitism, hating Jews and discriminating against Jews institutionally, and widespread societal hatred of Jews, weaned off enormously following the Second World War, and virtually does not exist in the Western world. I mean, there are certainly people who harbor ill sentiments towards Jews, just like there's people who harbor ill sentiments towards any group of people. But the Jewish community in Canada is a very affluent, very well-educated, very, in many ways, assimilated community in Canada that is extremely privileged compared to many other communities who do suffer much more extreme, I'd say, forms of discrimination, and both institutionally and practically speaking. So I think that these constant fears around anti-Semitism are fueled actually by Zionism itself, which, as you know, Hannah, is dependent on the existence of anti-Semitism in order for it to maintain its relevance and legitimacy. Because if it's accepted that, for the most part, Jews are accepted as minorities throughout the diaspora, then there is no real reason to have Israel. Israel was established, the argument, as a safe haven for Jewish people. But I feel perfectly safe in Canada as a Jew, and I don't really know anyone who doesn't. There are people, many Jewish students who on university campuses feel unsafe, but that's because they were raised to believe that Israel was behaving in a certain way that it actually isn't. They were raised to believe that Israel is this great bastion of democracy in a sea of darkness, and these kind of falsehoods, these kind of mythologies. So when they're confronted with human rights activists who are exposing Israeli apartheid, and they're told by the people that they've been raised to trust, such as their community leaders, their rabbis, their parents, that these human rights activists are actually motivated by hatred of Jews, and they just want to get you, then of course they're going to be afraid. And that's unfortunately the consequence of Zionism. That's the consequence of Israel being founded as an ethno-nationalist state.
Actually, you reminded me with a quote from Herzl, who's the founder of the Zionist ideology, where he said very blatantly, anti-Semitism grows, so do I, he said. So he was based all his ideology on anti-Semitism. So, among other quotes from him. But, this is really another issue. And, I always quote the first people who fought against Zionism were Jews themselves. And we should make our listeners aware of the first anti-Zionist manifesto, which was issued by the rabbis in Germany. They could Google it and learn about it, because Jews and rabbis were the first ones to confront it. But this is, again, another subject. I want to go back to the subject. Could you give us some websites where, first about the IGV, and then about the coalition to boycott Israel and the unsettling goods?
So the website for Independent Jewish Voices is ijvcanada.org.
Mm-hmm.
And the website for the Canadian Boycott Coalition is canadianboycottcoalition.ca.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be updated shortly with information about the campaign to put pressure on Canadian Tire to get rid of SodaStream.
Yeah.
And the Unsettling Goods campaign is operated through the United Church of Canada.
Yeah.
I don't know the website off by heart, but I imagine if your listeners are interested, they could just Google Unsettling Goods, and that page should come up.
Yeah, actually that's how I do it, because I never remember the website, we encourage our listeners to watch for these galas and dinners, because sometimes they call them JNF galas, sometimes they call them dinners, and I'm not sure of the fine difference between them. But, we encourage our listeners to watch for them and really confront them, because they are really affront to humanity and equal rights and equality among all peoples. I just want to give you one last chance if you want to address our listeners, Tyler, and we thank you for being with us. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I would just say to conclude that if anyone is interested in getting involved with the campaign, to contact me at tyler@ijvcanada.org. You don't have to be Jewish to get involved. I can link you with other individuals in cities across Canada that are doing work around the JNF. I think, Hannah, you would probably be the best person to contact for folks in Vancouver. There's lots of Independent Jewish Voices members who are active on this issue as well. And maybe as a final point, I really highly encourage everyone to sign the Change.org petition that's been up for a few days now, putting pressure on the Canadian performer, the singer Nikki Yanofsky, to cancel her performances for the JNF Negev Galas in Winnipeg on May 27th and in Calgary on June 18th. So, Hannah, I could send you that link. If you could stick that up on your website, that would be much appreciated.
For sure. Yeah, we'll add it to this interview if you like. That'll be good. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Tyler, for being with us, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. And keep up the good work.
Likewise. Thanks very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And that was Hannah Kawas talking with Tyler Levitan, the campaign coordinator for Independent Jewish Voices Canada. And with that, we conclude another edition of the Voice of Palestine. Please check out our website, voiceofpalestine.ca, where we have archives of all our shows for over 10 years. And a final reminder of the first picket against the JNF this Sunday, April 6th, 5 p.m., outside the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Vancouver. Thanks for tuning in, and we will all be continuing the march for a free Palestine and to stop the JNF.